What are some of your top myths that you've heard about 3D printing? I'm going to cut that last section.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start because this one hits close to home with a customer that came to us recently. And that is the myth that a lot of people seem to have in their heads where you can 3D print something like a standard part cheaper than you can just go buy it off the shelf.
So the assumption is that I'm able to make it from a 3D printer cheaper than buying it myself.
Yes.
In all cases, just ubiquitously for everybody.
Yes. Now,
Probably not best advice, huh?
It's not the best advice, but it's nuanced in a way because in some cases that's true, but in a lot of cases it's nowhere close to true. Like there's a reason why we don't 3D print forks.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're widely available and they're cheap and that sort of thing. Similarly, little things like phone holders or desk organizers.
There's things that are otherwise mass-produced, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Even something like replacement boat parts, replacement drone parts, replacement car parts. Usually the manufacturers make those and they're readily available for, I mean, you may not be happy to pay, I don't know, $10 for a replacement plastic piece, but it's still going to be cheaper than reverse engineering it and 3D printing a replica in most cases. And so that's a myth that hits pretty close to home.
What do you think?
Recently.
If you have the CAD file and it's your property, it might be cheaper to create one of. But if you don't even have a CAD file of it and you're just trying to reverse engineer something, is that when it gets way more expensive?
The reverse engineering is definitely part of it. But I would go a step further and say that if you're just hypothesizing that you have a CAD model and it can be printed cheaper with no 3D printing exposure, and so you want to hire someone to print it for you, just go buy a replacement part. It's probably not going to be cheaper if you're trying to do it as a source.
I think that's the key part, though, is how much of the service you're actually, or how much of the work you're actually outsourcing.
Okay.
Now, like you said, if you have to both draw the part and export that as a service as well as the printing itself, I mean, there is cost to modeling.
Yes.
Someone's time. In some cases, I think like you were describing, like if you had like a toy drone and you didn't have the file, it might be cheaper just to go to the original manufacturer and buy the part for $1, $2, than try and make it yourself. On the flip side, if that manufacturer no longer makes that object or no one has any backups anywhere, okay, then your only option might be printing.
Right. If you have something rare or something really old that you need a replacement part for, maybe 3D printing makes sense. But it always depends on the situation. I feel like more often than not, when people come to us for replacement parts, they're looking for a way to like stick it to the manufacturer and like not buy the real one.
Shortcut things. Yeah.
Be like, oh, but I could 3D print that for $2 instead of paying $9 for the real one. And that's just not the case.
Their goal is lower overhead, not address the problem of I can't source these parts.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Car parts. You've had a lot of people ask you about car parts, right?
We have, actually. No, I was talking to Greg about some car parts for his Jeep recently. He wants to do like a custom air intake sort of thing.
Yeah, and in that particular case, it's custom. That's why you can't go to the store, can't go to the car manufacturer and ask for one. You gotta make it yourself.
I've thought so many times because we just listed our house, so I've come into so many things where I'm like, I bet if I had like a 3D printer, I could make like a little thing like this to solve this one little problem or something like that. But it's like one-off cases and stuff like that. Or it's like a unique situation. It's not like I'm going to go to Lowe's and pick up something there that's going to cost me 28 cents versus printing it at home for 17 cents or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But how many unique situations do you have?
Right.
And how much is your time worth to make the file to print the part?
Mm-hmm.
I once had not my current car, but a previous car where I 3D printed like some little, there was a rocker arm that, I don't know, it opened or closed something inside the door panel. And so I 3D printed a replacement part for it when I easily could have went and bought it off the shelf. But that's mostly because I had a printer and I have CAD skills and it was easier to do that way. But if I'm just like
Stick it to the man.
Yeah. So I was able to stick it to the man, and I was a poor college student, so it made sense at the time. But I'm going to argue that for most people, it makes more sense to just go to AutoZone and spend $4 and get a replacement piece of plastic than going through all the hassle of drawing it and printing it yourself or having it printed.
So myth number 1, it is not always cheaper to 3D print something than to get it from the manufacturer.
Correct.
Right.
Beautiful summation, Kevin.
There you go.
Did you have a myth that you wanted to throw out there? Or were you relying on us to throw out the myths?
I do have another myth.
We all had myths?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know if you did or not. I mean, I came up with 2.
Well, all right.
What do you have, Ben?
I actually, this is the first blog I ever wrote for CAD Dimensions, and I was trying to come up with different myths, but these ones keep coming up.
Okay.
3D printed organs. I have told a few different people outside of work, oh yeah, Stratasys can now print synthetic human tissue.
Okay.
Oh, so you can create organs. Well, you can create one that will not work well inside a person. I mean, you can put it in and see what happens. And every time I say that, someone thinks that we can now print living tissue.
Yeah.
Not synthetic. They don't even hear that word.
Right.
So yeah, there's kind of 2 branches to medical printing. There's like what we're doing with Stratasys, which is more of like medical simulation. So these models are never intended to go into a person. They're designed for someone to train or practice on or make educated decisions around using a model as opposed to just looking on a computer screen. The flip side of that, which is more still in the research theoretical stage, is the actual printing of living cells and organisms. Yeah. So like I've seen a couple examples, like I know I've seen printed ears, I've seen printed some other small
liver cell tissue.
Yeah, cell tissue.
It's not a working liver. It's just they're using liver tissue and then making it into a shape.
And it is something they're researching. They do want to get to a point where they could potentially produce organs because, yeah, there's a shortage of replacement organs. But that's still in a very theoretical stage. Like I said, what we're mainly working on is more like practice models and training surgeons, that kind of stuff.
Why do you think this 3D printed organ thing, like real organs, is so popular? Because
I have a theory on this.
Okay.
I want to hear your theory. I think you've thought this one out.
I have.
Okay.
The movie Face Off.
I have not seen that movie.
Okay,
That is
so
a good movie.
So
Is it?
That's a really good movie. First of all, yeah.
Okay.
I don't want to like
Is
it as
it
much
about
as I do.
stealing faces?
So the idea is that
Okay.
John Travolta and Nick Cage are going to change identities entirely, and the way that they do it is there's a scene where Nick Cage gets his ear cut off,
Okay.
and there's a laser that runs over a bed of gelatinous goo, and then all of a sudden they can
New ear.
reattach his ear, right?
Okay.
That
ahead
was
of
the
their
first time I ever thought like that's something you could do in science, like that's a cool application, and now to know that it's like potentially possible, that's cool. Like that's a cool
When
thing.
did this movie come out?
I don't know, like the 90s.
Okay.
90s, yeah.
I was an
Okay.
impressionable youth.
Yeah. If anyone in the audience has seen this
Guarantee.
movie
We get comments.
And thinks that this is why 3D printed organs are so popular, leave us a comment and say that you think Kevin is right.
Somebody validate me. Validate my feelings, please. This is what the internet's about, right?
I'm going to
Yes.
stick with that it's just the shortage of organs in general.
I don't agree
that
with
makes
you.
sense.
I like Kevin's answer better. It's more fun. I don't get it, but so often when I say 3D printing to like someone I've just met, they're like, "Oh, 3D printed organs." I'm
Yeah.
gonna say at least half the time.
That's almost all the time. Yeah, when I tell people that, like, "Oh, can you guys do stuff like that? Like, you're making a heart in your lab?" I'm like, "No,
No. Almost nobody is doing that. It's in a lab setting, like at Carnegie Mellon.
And even then, it is a in those situations, it's a pile of cells. It's not a functioning organ that knows how to process things and do what it does.
Right.
Yeah,
Here's what I
It's
think.
so different.
but
I
it's
think
close.
that whenever someone says 3D printed organ testing, whatever it is in the news, people automatically think, oh, it's a finished product. And there's a lot of that. Facebook is a great place to share a lot of wrong information and really fun videos.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I guess you're right. So much of what we see, I mean, it doesn't even have to be related to 3D printed organs or 3D printing in general, but so often a research a video or a paper will get published and then it gets really popular online, but it's just research or it's just a company product announcement, and that product might not hit for another 2 years until it ships. It's just being announced. Same thing with research. Like, they made a discovery, they got a patent, something like that, but that doesn't mean it's a commercially used product thing today, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But what is commercially available, sort of, it is, stuff you can practice on. The synthetic stuff, which is cool in its own right. And also, like, my favorite, this is in my blog I wrote, that little girl holding up a model of her heart.
Yeah.
The heart surgeon worked on, like, a bunch of times before working on her own heart. I mean, that is share-worthy in itself. I don't think that you need to say, they printed 7 real functioning hearts of that little girl to do the surgery. No, it's cool enough that you can scan it and print a fake one.
Yeah, the important thing to emphasize with those kind of models is it's not something that we're expecting every doctor to have a 3D printed model to practice on before they do every surgery. There's some surgeries that are very routine to doctors, and it's not needed. But for those very rare and one-off cases where you're not really sure how exactly you're going to take on the problem, that's when it's most beneficial, because you can use that artificial simulation to practice or decide what you're going to do.
Right. Better surgeries, better medicine. That's all good stuff.
So myth number 2, while there are lots of applications for 3D printing in healthcare, we're still a little ways away from generating functioning organs from a 3D printer.
Correct. You're not going to be getting a 3D printed liver next year.
And the plagues of answering those questions
Who are you?
only reside with us. So.
Yes.
Who are you to say that?
Well,
I'm
Probably.
just a humble 3D printing nerd. Leave me alone.
By the way, hold on, one more thing. Shout out to Onion for creating the best organ donor video ever. They have this, like their fake news article, they're like, some wonderful donor has donated 1,000 livers and delivered it to our front door. Just thank you, whoever it is, the anonymous donor. Like, please come back for more.
Oh my gosh. Terrible.
If you haven't seen that video, I suggest looking that one up.
why?
Ben will link it in the description since he's such a big fan.
Yeah, why not?
Ken had an interesting myth that I think is worth going over, and then I got one more, and then we can move on to our next segment.
Sure. I'll keep mine quick, but I guess the general myth is that 3D printing is like an instant. Like, when you print something, you get a part almost instantly. And I think that comes mostly from the name rapid prototyping. People think that, well, I put something in a printer, no matter how big it is, I'm going to get it in 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And that's not exactly true. It does take some time depending on the part, how much material you're putting down. But when we say rapid prototyping, that phrase is really in comparison to traditional manufacturing.
Right.
So how long does it take you, if you don't necessarily have a CNC available right now, to get a metal part or to get a plastic part?
So faster, just not as fast
Not
as some
instant.
people might expect.
There's like this, the most common one here is the Star Trek replicator. Like,
Sure.
there's this like, oh, I press a button and this object immediately appears. That's not a reality yet.
Right.
Yeah.
But in comparison to traditional methods, depending on what you're trying to do, it can be significantly faster. It's
Sure.
just not an instant technology.
Do you think we're getting over that?
It's getting faster, much faster.
I mean,
The
more
expectation?
I mean more from an expectation standpoint.
As more people use it, yeah. I think that along with the technologies are getting faster, so that you're seeing some companies where you're printing a batch of parts in 20 minutes, 30 minutes, as opposed to hours now. That is feasible.
Yeah. I guess I do see that all the time where, depending on which company it is, sometimes when I'm visiting, they only call 3D printed parts RP parts or rapid prototype parts. Like, that's their
Designation.
terminology,
Yeah.
and that's what they've been using for years. But I feel like it's misleading.
A little bit.
And I go to other companies where it's the complete opposite, right? And they understand 3D printing and they outsource from all different technologies, and so they understand that even if it's rapid in terms of it doesn't take 6 weeks to get from the machine shop, it's still a manufacturing process that takes time.
Maybe we should stop putting out videos at like 6,000 times the speed
Yeah, right.
of a 3D print. I'm guilty of that as well.
We're perpetuating this cycle.
No.
Yeah, because it's like done in 60 seconds for the video.
No
as long as
more
you-
time lapses.
Yeah. As long as
We're
you
calling it right now.
Time lapse in real time.
Yeah, as long as you say it's sped up, because I don't think anyone wants to sit around for a few hours to watch some of our things be printed.
I'll tell you what, especially when it's like, ooh, new 3D printing technology, something like that. A lot of those videos are sped up.
Right.
And they just like
They don't mention it.
Don't say it. So
Because they want to get to the end part to show you what it looks like without
Yeah.
losing your attention.
so much so that sometimes it fools me and I have to like dig through the article or something to be like, oh, the video is sped up 6 times. I'm like, now it makes sense.
Nobody mentions post-processing, which is the other part.
Right.
That too. A lot
Like,
of
do you have to cure
times.
parts? Do you have to soak them in tank? Do you have to
Tumble and
spray it or
paint
something?
'em,
Yeah, like
sand 'em.
what else goes into actually having that fancy, nice finished part that they show you at the end of the video?
Yeah. Yeah.
So myth number 3, 3D printing is fast, but it's not instant.
It's not Star Trek.
Yes.
Not Star Trek.
Not a Star Trek replicator, unfortunately. And then the last myth that I wanted to talk about reminds me so much of the organ thing, and that is that 3D printed food is the future.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
No?
Guess what? I went on Google Trends today.
And
And I
3D
looked-
printed food was up there, wasn't it?
I went, I looked up 3D printing and I went to Trends. Just guess what was number 1. We've already covered it once.
Guns.
3D printed steak.
Steak.
Again.
I think we're much more likely to see mass-produced food from like artificial, like a lab, like lab-grown beef, lab-grown, flesh. Like there's applications for that. I think prior to, because you've got to have a feedstock that is food-based that can be extruded in a way that it's challenging to make it, appetizing that way.
It definitely is.
Right? Like, because I've never seen like something food 3D printed and said like that looks pretty good.
So
I'm
I
gonna
guess
eat that.
I guess the question I always think about when we talk about 3D printed food is, what is the benefit you gain from 3D printing it?
So like,
Like,
yeah,
what is the purpose of
you're
like
just
other
repurposing food
Yeah.
from one form to another form. You're
Yeah.
not growing something.
Yeah.
You're not manufacturing
the
something.
only time I've ever seen an article about 3D printing food where I was like, wow, that's a good use, was I think I saw in like Sweden or Norway or somewhere up in Northern Europe, they were taking like not ground food but more like pulverized food and trying to shape it back into the original so that people still had the sense that they were eating not just a bowl of mush, they were eating real food.
McDonald's McRib.
Yeah.
That's
So it was
what that
more for
is.
like senior.
reconstituted flesh to look like a rib shape.
Yeah.
Now, why are they doing that, Ken? I'm guessing this is for people
Senior
that had
citizens,
trouble.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. That
That's
information is
important
pretty
detail, yeah. Important detail, yeah.
People
point.
not just eating reshaped mush for fun.
Yeah.
Like, they have a reason
Yeah.
behind it.
I like my bowl of mush.
Yeah, yeah.
It's more of a aesthetic thing than it is a functional thing.
Yeah, but I feel like most of the time I see trendy 3D printed food stuff, they don't acknowledge the why behind it. They're just like, look, we made a robot put cheese on a cracker. It's
Right.
3D printing.
Or
but
pancakes, or yeah.
But
Okay,
why?
those are cool. 3D printed pancakes.
3D printed pancakes are
'Cause
pretty
I don't know
cool.
about you. When I went to a diner as a kid, all I got were Mickey Mouse pancakes. Now I could get like a detailed Santa pancake. Heck yeah.
It's kind of like when I think of it, I think of it as a similar comparison to like those robotic bartenders. Cool, novel, but not really bringing a ton of value to the end product, I guess.
You want some more?
No, what I think does have value with 3D printing food are desserts, because desserts are supposed to look pretty. That's the whole thing behind it. So 3D printed chocolate,
3D printed ice cream.
like
That's
ice
something
cream,
you could
cake,
do.
things that are supposed to look kind of fantastic and
You guys are taking my
Fairy tale.
myth and making it sound like it would be really cool, and now I'm upset about it.
I've
so
got a
thanks for
cool
that.
idea. What about a 5-axis robotic arm with a 3D printer that extrudes icing, and you can program like cake decorations?
They already have cake decorations.
No,
Do they do
Kevin.
that?
Why?
I don't know. So my wife doesn't have to do it. She doesn't have to stand there with a piping bag and draw
The
stuff
point
on.
is, I think that it would be cool. It would be super cool. But it gets blown out of the proportions where people say, it's the future.
Yeah.
And when I think of something that broad of a statement, it sounds like we're all going to have it in our house,
Right.
printing food for us, or we're going to go to a fast food restaurant and it's going to print me out a meal.
That's not the
no.
shape it's going to take.
No,
Yeah.
I'm not saying it'll never happen because you don't never say never, but that's certainly not the case
Yeah.
today. We're so far from that.
Again, if it was, I feel like it'd be more of a novelty than a functional
Right.
purpose.
Right.
So myth number 4, 3D printing food has its place, but it's not going to be mainstream anytime soon.
Exactly.
I hope not, anyway. Except in dessert.
Except in desserts. We can all get behind 3D printing
Yeah.
chocolate. That's fun. Everyone loves that. I think this is where we go to our next segment.